Alright, so Derek Chisora is, well, basically he made a post on Instagram saying who he wants to face in his 50th fight. Now, you may remember he talked about having, well, this was kind of a three fight plan. So the first one was going to be Joe Joyce, his last quote unquote fight in London. His last fight in Manchester obviously happened in February. It was against Oleksandr. And then he talked about having his last fight in his native Zimbabwe. Now, that seems to be off the table now, the Zimbabwe location anyway. And Derek Chisora has kind of been saying one thing and then saying another in interviews. And some he's been saying this is your 50 is it, that's it, he's done, he'll go out wherever, most likely in London. But then in other interviews, like he gave with Talksport, I think he said it with Simon Jordan, that he's going to carry on. So for me, I'm kind of like, well, what are you doing? Please, for the love of God, don't carry on. I really hope he doesn't, because people talk about Joe Joyce and they say he sounds a little bit, punchy, he's pausing a bit. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, but he's always done that. I've met Joe Joyce in person. I interviewed him a couple of years ago. And yeah, he sounds to me pretty similar to how he did then. Again, like, I'm not there face to face with him all the time. I've hardly ever, I think I've seen Joe Joyce in person other than that, maybe 2 or 3 more times. But I don't know what he's like day to day, people who are really there close to him and can see. For me, he just sounds as he always sounds. Whereas Derek Chisora, on the other hand, to me, he does sound noticeably that there's a deterioration in his speech there. And I just worry, he might have already gone to the point where it's not fixable. But if he carries on, I mean, well, definitely it won't be fixable then. And it's not just what's happened to you now. It's not just the fact that, you're sounding a little bit slurred, you're sounding a little bit punchy now. That doesn't get better with time, even if you stop boxing. It's a constant thing. It's just going to deteriorate more with age. And I just worry that Chisora, although he's a multi-millionaire, although he's had a good career even without winning a world title, he's had mega paydays that probably don't warrant his ability, but he's been able to do it. I just worry that in future, when he's about 60, 70, what good is those millions in the bank if your quality of life is really adversely affected, Anyway, enough about that. We'll talk about who he was talking about, or who he was hinting that he would like to face in his 50th fight. The man, the myth, the legend, Oleksandr Usyk. That's who he wants for his 50th fight. Now, Derek Chisora, actually, you could argue he may actually be... Look, I certainly wouldn't want to see Oleksandr Usyk face him. I hope he faces Joseph Parker next. I'll do a separate video on that. But Chisora's recent run of form, a win over Joe Joyce and a win against Oleksandr, the Oleksandr fight was an eliminator. It wasn't a final eliminator for the IBF. Now, obviously, Usyk doesn't have that, but it's going to bump him high up the rankings. It'll probably bump him up the rankings of the other sanctioning bodies as well, but in particular the IBF. And given the fact that Bakoli and Jagba, if they are still fighting, likely won't be a final eliminator, that's going to bump him even higher up the rankings. I wouldn't be shocked if he's in the top 5 of the IBF. I haven't checked their rankings, but it wouldn't shock me if he was. So you could argue his recent run of form maybe does warrant a shot, but again, he's talking about this being his last fight. So if it is, go out with a world title fight. If you win, it'd be an amazing story. But I think the best way for Derek Chisora to go out would be a trilogy fight with Dillian Whyte in London. I think at this point now, look, Chisora could feel he won the first fight. He was certainly leading, in my opinion, the second fight before he ended up getting caught. And it was largely down to the fact that he got a point deducted and he went very reckless after that. Could have won the second fight. I think now at this point I'd make him firm favourite over Dillian Whyte, which is crazy because Chisora's had a much longer career and arguably a more punishing career, but he still has more left in the tank than a Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte just looks shot to bits. Shot to bits does Dillian Whyte look lately. And there was no doubt in my mind Joe Parker or Joe Joyce would have beaten him had they fought on April the 5th, or would they be fighting on April the 5th. And I think now he's there for the taking. I really do. I mean, I cannot get that Ebenezer Tete performance out of my head. It was shockingly bad. And I'm telling you now, if you put Chisora in with Ebenezer Tete, Chisora would have took care of him in a couple of rounds. I'm telling you now, and I know you could say, well, it's a style, whatever. No, Dillian Whyte looks shocking. So him against Chisora, I'd make Chisora favourite. He might even stop Dillian Whyte this time. Seriously. I'd make Chisora that much of a favourite. But it tells a story, a trilogy fight between those two. It would do numbers on the zone in London if they did do it. Him against Usyk. He fought Usyk 5 years ago nearly. And he did well early on. He kind of shell-shocked Usyk a bit. But once Usyk got his, once he got the lay of the land, so to speak, I didn't find that fight particularly close. I found it was a fairly comprehensive win for Oleksandr Usyk. Some people were really oh, Usyk looked terrible. It's like, well, not really. I mean, yeah, he was a bit shell shocked early on, but you got to think of it like this: when has he ever fought someone who's like Chisora, who's going to outweigh him by 20, 30, 40 pounds? I think he was about 20 pounds heavier than him, who's also shorter than him. He's not used to that. Certainly not a heavyweight, getting underneath his punches and sticking it on him. It's very taxing to do on the fighter itself. You need a lot of stamina. So when people are saying, well, that's all Anthony Joshua or Fury needs to do, oh, how are they going to get under his shots when one of them is 6'6", the other is 6'9"? How are they going to, bob and weave and, have a high output and push him back like that when Chisora's 6'1" and that's what he's made a career out of doing? It's not that straightforward. And as I said, Oleksandr Usyk adjusted. If he fights him now, it's like just no. I wouldn't accept that fight now at this stage. I know you could say Chisora going back to some good results, but seriously, I don't think it'll happen. I think Oleksandr Usyk has his own kind of plan, and I think it involves him fighting either Parker or Dubois, most likely Dubois, but I'd quite like to see him fight Parker, and then having that bit of a gimmick fight to go out on his own terms. I think that's what Usyk is going to do. I mean, some would argue that a Chisora fight at this stage might even be a gimmick fight at this stage, so there you go. But no, I would rather, for Chisora's own sake, not see him in there with Oleksandr Usyk ever again, to be honest with you. 5 years ago, Chisora, I was surprised how much he had left in the tank in the Usyk fight 5 years ago. He still has a bit left in, but not enough, nowhere near enough. And certainly 5 years later, it ain't going to get any easier for you. He's had 2 losses to Joseph Parker. In one of the fights, he took a bit of a shellacking. He took punishment in the second fight. He struggled with that guy, Kubrat Pulev. He took a beating off Tyson Fury. Yeah, he's had a bit of a renaissance or a bit of a twilight over the last couple of fights, but it's not, no. Let's not do Chisora versus Oleksandr Usyk too, please. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, people, if you could, smash the like button, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. And until next time, peace.